Okay, hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar, which is about getting started with teaching English online. I can see there's a lot of you joining. There's about 5,300 people more or less joined our webinar today. So that's very exciting. And I can see you come from all over the world, from Italy, Brazil, Peru, Ukraine, Argentina, lots of different countries there. So welcome everybody. My name is Helen Allen and I work on digital language teaching, learning and training at Cambridge Assessment English. And with me today is Ollie.
Hello, I'm Ollie Wood and I'm a teacher and teacher trainer working in Italy.
Okay, so let's get started. Ollie?
All right then. So we're going to talk about some of the key features of online platforms and how you can use them in your lessons. We'll walk you through an example of how to run some common stages of a lesson using an online platform. Then we're going to take a look at 3 popular platforms: Zoom, Google Hangouts, and Microsoft Teams. Finally, at the end, you'll have a chance to ask any questions that you may have. Before we start, let's find out how you feel about teaching online. So please write in now and tell us how you feel about teaching online. I imagine that many of you are responding to the current situation and may not have intended to teach online, or perhaps you're keen to explore different ways of reaching students. It'd be interesting for us to find out. So write in now and tell us how you feel about teaching online.
I can see some comments here. Overwhelming, terrifying. So far, so good. So some of you are already teaching online. Uncomfortable.
Yeah, nervous, overwhelmed.
Excited.
Weird.
Yeah, impatient. That's very interesting because it can be a bit frustrating because you're used to being able to deliver your teaching and helping your learners in a very immediate way. And sometimes it takes a bit longer on an online platform. So I understand that. Yeah, challenging.
Absolutely. It's kind of almost a reset for some people, adapting to the online environment.
And impersonal there as well. I mean, we will come to that later in the webinar, Ollie, but we do have some tips to help you around how to make it a bit more personal and have that kind of interaction that you would normally have in the classroom with your learners.
Yeah. All right, well.
Yes, you've got very big classrooms as well, yes. Okay, should we carry on?
Sure. So even if teaching online is a bit unexpected for you, it's a chance to develop professionally and explore some different ways of interacting with your students. In the future, more teaching may go online, so we can make the most of this opportunity to develop in ways that will benefit us for our careers. We hope today's webinar will give you the confidence to get started and to explore the options that are out there.
Yes, so teaching online very definitely comes with its own set of challenges, but it can also bring benefits. And one of these is flexibility. So you can blend independent online study and online classes to suit different learner needs, or you may be able to run classes at different times to what you usually do, or to deliver learning to a wider audience or people in different locations. To succeed, teachers and learners need to adapt. We can't replicate exactly what we do in the face-to-face classroom, but we can find ways to achieve the same outcomes. And to do this, we need to be able to make use of the tools available to us online. We need to be able to share our resources easily, to maximize interaction between teachers and learners and between learners themselves. And we also need to maintain a positive learning environment. And of course, we need to think about how to do this safely, keeping students safe and protecting their data.
Now, there are lots of platforms available for delivering online lessons. For some of you, the platform will be set by your institution. For others, you may find the number of platforms simply overwhelming. To help you choose, you'll need to decide what kinds of features are most important to you in your teaching context. Just like in face-to-face teaching, the tools and strategies you use with primary students, for example, might be very different to those you use with high school students. We're going to look at some of the key features of online platforms to help you narrow down your search. A bit later on, we're going to look at exactly how you can access and use these features, but for now, we just want to show you the value of them.
That's right. We'll come to what buttons you click on and where to go a bit later in the webinar. So first of all, let's think about audio and video. For the most part, this is how you'll interact with your students and how they'll interact with each other. And it's best if everyone is able to use video because it makes the experience more engaging and allows for interactions which are more similar to the face-to-face environment. However, this isn't always possible. For example, your students might live in an area with lower internet speeds. So if you or your students don't have a high enough internet speed, you can just use audio. And this will improve the lesson experience for everybody. You'll still be able to present your information to your students, give them feedback, and also hear what they've got to say. And the other thing is that you don't need to have your audio or video on every second of the lesson. You might turn yours off when learners are doing a task, for example, and then back on when you want their attention or you're doing feedback.
The next feature that you may want to use is screen share. You can use this to show your students what's on your screen. For example, slides or a document, a text, an image, or even your browser window. In fact, if you're new to online teaching, this is a good feature to use straight away because it's very similar to sharing content via an interactive whiteboard or with a projector in the face-to-face classroom. You can do exactly the same thing online. Just open your presentation or document, share your screen, and begin. Your students will see your screen and hear your voice, and you will still be able to hear, see, and interact with your students as well. So you can ask them questions, and they can get your attention if they have questions.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing you can share is the whiteboard. This can be a really useful tool if your platform has one. Instead of sharing your screen, you can use the whiteboard as the focal point of your lesson. For example, here on the left, you can see Ollie's pasted a gapful activity to do with the class. And on the right, he's listed new vocabulary from the lesson with the part of speech and the word stress. So you can do the same things that you would in a real life classroom with a normal whiteboard. Sometimes you have a few extra features, and many whiteboards allow more than one person to write on the board at the same time. So you could have several different students writing on the board without them fighting over the pens. You might be able to paste in pictures onto your board or text or activities and annotate these. You can usually write or draw in different colors and highlight, expand and shrink text. And you also have options to undo and redo changes to your board. That's really useful. At the end of the lesson, you can usually save your whiteboard instead of losing everything as you clean it for the next class. And if the content on your whiteboard is shareable, then you can use this saved whiteboard in a future lesson or send it to your students for revision. Don't worry though, if your platform doesn't have a whiteboard included, you can use a third-party whiteboard and just screen share, or you could use a shared document, something like a Google Doc.
Another great feature is the chat. This allows you and your students to type to each other in much the same way as text messages or WhatsApp on your phone. Now, that may not seem very special, but in fact, this is a key tool for adapting teaching to the online environment. For example, you and the students can ask and answer questions. Students can show they're ready or have finished a task. You can use it to give written instructions. You can display errors and elicit corrections. You can share documents, just drag and drop them into the box. And you can give praise, and sometimes you can use emojis, stickers, or badges.
Yeah, emojis and stickers are nice, especially for younger learners, but they're nice for all ages, really. Okay, so breakout rooms. Many platforms offer breakout rooms. In class, we often want our students to work in small groups or pairs. So putting students into breakout rooms is as easy as grouping them together in real life, really. You just need to decide how many groups you want, and whether you want the platform to put the students into groups automatically, or if you want to organize those groups yourself. What can students do in a breakout room? Well, they can talk to each other in a private group or in a pair, just like they would in class. And you'll probably want to monitor them as well. You can easily do this by joining a room and listening to the conversation and guiding them and contributing if necessary. And you as the teacher can move from one group to another. So it's pretty much like facilitating pair work or group work and monitoring that in a normal classroom. Breakout rooms will increase interest and motivation levels in all groups, but they're really useful for large groups where you may want to increase the opportunities for language practice, especially things like speaking or sharing ideas, or even things like group writing or preparation for tasks at home.
So now that we've had a look at a few key features, it's time to hear from you again. Which of these features do you think are most useful and why? Write in now to tell us. Can you see yourself using a virtual whiteboard, or would you prefer to share your screen? Can you imagine your students working together in breakout rooms? Would you use the chat box? What for? We'd really like to know, so write in now and tell us which of the features seem most useful for you and why.
So I can see those answers coming in. Excuse me. A lot of screen share.
Absolutely, a lot of screen share and whiteboard. I mean, that makes sense. As I'd said earlier, by sharing your screen, you're able to replicate a lot of what you do face to face. So it is a good place to start.
Yeah, that's true. And if you're doing like audio and video, you know, that's great. When you screen share, you're showing them what you've got on your computer. It's really useful. Especially if you've got like collaborative documents as well. It's really nice because then you can all work in the same space. Chat is okay. It's interesting because chat is one of those transformative features. It's something that you will see later. It can really help you understand what your students are doing. But we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, not too many breakout rooms coming by.
No.
Maybe we can change that later on.
Maybe. Actually, all of the features, yeah.
Yeah, all of the above, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, the features we've talked about here are just some of the essentials to get you going online. Our platforms may also have other features, such as hand raising, setting of assignments, and as we mentioned earlier, they allow you to use emojis and award stickers.
Yeah, that's right. So we've been talking about different features of online platforms, but now we're going to look at how you can use them together in a sequence of activities, so in a real kind of lesson scenario. We're going to take a simple lesson process of input, practice, and feedback. And this is in a vocabulary lesson for our example. And we're going to show you this process using Zoom, but you can achieve pretty much the same things on other platforms too. As we go through this lesson sequence, try and think about any similarities or differences between teaching online and in a face-to-face classroom. So at the start of the lesson, you and your class all meet in the main area or the main room. And you remember at this point, you'll need to ask your students to mute their microphones or change the settings so that they enter with muted microphones, especially if you're teaching a large group, because even the smallest noises can be picked up and they're quite often amplified as well. Students can easily unmute their microphones when they want to contribute, and you can mute microphones. As the teacher, you can mute those too. The start of the lesson is a good time to share any handouts, either by dropping a document into the chat box or sharing the link to where you've saved it in your school system, for example. Or if you sent handouts by email, maybe checking students have received them, or making sure that the students have their ebook open in the right place if you're using an ebook. We're in Zoom here, so you can see at the bottom of the screen there, we can share the whiteboard with the students by clicking on the green share button at the bottom of the screen.
Now, you might start by showing learning objectives on the whiteboard and a warmer. Here, the students imagine they're going to study English abroad in one of these cities, and they rank the cities from 1 to 5. You can set a simple activity like this using the whiteboard. The students can take turns answering, but it can get very noisy if you all stay in the main room. So either nominate students to speak so they don't speak over each other, or put the students into breakout rooms in pairs to have a discussion. With a warmer like this, you could let the platform automatically assign pairs to breakout rooms. This makes it quick and easy. And don't forget to remind students to turn their microphones back on. You can then visit and monitor a few of the rooms. It's important that students know you may visit and listen so they're not surprised. And if you're teaching children, this may encourage better classroom behaviors and interaction between students. You can encourage and prompt students in the usual way. After a minute or two, you can close the breakout rooms and bring everyone back to the main area. For a follow-up whole class discussion, make sure mics are muted. You can normally nominate a few students that you didn't monitor to ask how they ranked their cities and why. If the students type their answers into the chat, you can use this information to help you lead the discussion. Now, let's move on to the next part of the lesson. Helen.
Okay, thank you. So I can see in the chat that people are talking about safety issues with Zoom, and we will come back to that at the end of the webinar. And we've got some advice for you there, so we'll come back to that. Okay, so here we're going to, in the next part of the lesson, we're going to use a text to introduce the vocabulary students will focus on. And you can share your screen to display a short text and a question, although for a longer text, you might consider sharing the text as a handout, or you might have an ebook that they can access. So you want them to read the text and look at the question. You give your instructions and you allow time for the students to read. And when they've finished, you can ask them to stay silent or to write their answer in the chat box. When everyone's finished, you can ask maybe 1 or 2 students to justify their answers orally and give them feedback. And again, you may need to remember to remind students to mute and unmute their microphones at this point. As they get used to the platform, they'll remember to do this on their own. But when you're getting started, sometimes you have to remind people to turn things on and off. Okay, so you return to the text and you can introduce the next activity. This time you want the learners to work in pairs on some true and false questions. You introduce the task and pop them back into breakout rooms. And if you let the platform assign the students, they'll probably work with a different partner each time. It's much quicker to let the platform assign the rooms, but you can choose the groupings as well if you want. So here the students can write their answers in the chat as they go. And it's nice to ask them to do this because then you can see from the main room, you can see which groups are struggling or which groups are finished or who's not doing anything. And then you can go and see who you want to visit in their rooms and pop in and just make sure they're all okay. So when you think everyone's finished, you close the breakout rooms and you bring them back to the main room for feedback. And you can do this by sharing the whiteboard, for example. You need to clearly nominate students to give their answers, either orally if you want to type the answers up, or you could nominate a student to write the answers on the board. You need to allow time for students to unmute their mics before they respond, and there can be some time lags between different speakers as well. So you'll probably need to give a bit more wait time than you do in a face-to-face environment. But you can elicit answers, you can ask for justifications, and you can write up your answers on the board.
So now it's time to focus on the target vocabulary. You share your screen to display the text, explain the task, and then put the students into breakout rooms to work together. Get students to put their answers in the chat and then monitor by joining them in the various breakout rooms. You can just listen, or if you need to get involved, you can. Then, when everyone has completed the task, it's time to bring them back to the main room to take whole class feedback to the board again. With the vocabulary on the board, you can also take this opportunity to check parts of speech and pronunciation. In the final activity of this lesson, the students are going to start using the vocabulary. You can set up productive activities on the board so the task is clear, and then students can refer back to it at any time. For a task like this, you can put students into small groups in the breakout rooms so that they can discuss and plan. For the finished product, in this case an advert, they could collaborate using a shared document such as a Google Doc, and they could continue to work on this together for homework as well. You can continue to monitor the different groups in the breakout rooms and by viewing the shared document if they're using one. Then when the students have completed the task or the time limit is up, you can bring everyone back to the main room to close the lesson, discuss any questions they have, and set some independent work or homework for the next lesson.
Thanks, Ali. So we've walked through a lesson sequence using an online platform, and you've seen here how you could use the different features or combine those features within the lesson. You can do some things in the same way as a face-to-face lesson, and some things are a little bit different. So we'd like to know now how you think teaching online is different to teaching in a face-to-face classroom. What would you do in the same way, and what would you do differently? So how is teaching online different to teaching in a face-to-face classroom? Pop your answers in the chat box and we'll have a little look. I mean, it's good to remember when you're getting started with something that's new, it's always good to keep it simple. So you don't have to start with all of these features. You might choose to just take one or two and use those, and then when you're happy, to integrate new ones.
So some people are saying it's easier to see understanding in the face-to-face classroom. I would say that's probably true. It is easier to see in the face-to-face classroom. So it's something to be aware of when you're online, and to maybe ask a few more concept check questions to make sure the students are on the right path.
I think it's certainly true, Ollie, that we're used to operating in a face-to-face classroom, a lot of us, and we're used to communicating in that particular kind of way. So it's easy for us to take the signals and to interpret the actions of our students and what they're saying. That is possible in an online classroom. It just takes a bit of getting used to.
Absolutely.
And maybe some of the ways that you do it are different as well. But it's a key concern of many teachers about teaching in this online environment.
Some things about precision and choreography of the lesson. Again, that's all true. I can't deny that. But here it's a matter of practice makes perfect. Just like when you first started in the face-to-face classroom, getting used to the different tools and the features and the platforms. Practice with friends, family, or other teachers.
Yeah, I think it's good to practice with other people, because it can feel a little bit, especially at first, it feels a bit like you're underwater or you're teaching in slow motion. You know, everything takes just that little bit longer, and you're processing quite a lot in your brain. So you're trying to teach, and then you're trying to manage the platform as well. So just take things slowly, try and pace it, and make sure that you've planned in advance, that you know what you're going to do when. That's the best advice you can have for that particular scenario. Yeah, I don't have anyone to practice with. Like, yeah, it's difficult. You could even just get someone you know, a friend, a partner, to go on the other end of it and maybe experience things as a teacher. So you teach them, and then maybe you get them to do something that you would do and experience what it feels like as a learner as well. Yeah. Okay, shall we move on, Ollie?
Yeah, let's take a closer look then at how to use a platform with all the features that we've been talking about. So we just now were showing you an example of a lesson in Zoom. Zoom is, of course, a very popular video communications platform, and it's available on your desktop. It's popular because you can get large groups of up to 100 people together on video, even in low bandwidth environments. It's also very easy to use. The basic version of Zoom is free, but it does have some limitations, mainly that group meetings have a 40-minute time limit. To remove this limit and to get some additional features, there's a small subscription fee. The best way to experience Zoom is through the desktop application. It's free to download from the main Zoom website, and it's very easy to install. You just follow the on-screen instructions. When you open Zoom, you'll see a simple menu with 4 options: New Meeting, Join, Schedule, and Share Screen. You can also schedule or start a meeting directly from the Zoom website. To schedule a lesson, you click Schedule, and then fill in the details of your meeting. The areas that you will use most often are topic, date, and time. This creates a link for your lesson, a meeting ID, and a password. You can share these via email or through your school system. In fact, your school administration may schedule lessons and invite students for you. Students either click on the link or join using the meeting ID and password. We recommend always using a password to ensure your lesson is private, and it's good practice to use first names only for usernames. Then when you're in a meeting, you'll see the following icons at the bottom of your screen: Invite participants, manage participants, share your screen, open chat, record the lesson, and assign breakout rooms. You can select Invite participants to add students to your lesson. You may want to do this if a student has lost the link or meeting ID that you sent when you first scheduled the meeting. By clicking on Manage Participants, you can rename, mute, and stop your students' video feeds. The mute button can be very useful if someone has forgotten to turn off their microphone when you're presenting something.
Thanks, Solly. So let's look at that share. So when you click on the share button, you see a screen that gives you different sharing options. So you can share your screen. So someone just mentioned, how do you share a PowerPoint? Well, when you click on the share button, you'll see the PowerPoint in this screen here, and then you click on it, and that's how you share it. So you can share a presentation, your browser, the whiteboard, and other things. A really important button on this screen is Share Computer Sound in the bottom left-hand corner. You'll need to share your sound if you want students to hear any audio or video that you play on your computer. So it's really small, like the text is really small there, but it's really useful to know where that button is because you're probably going to need it. So like you saw in the example earlier, you can use Zoom's online whiteboard just like a real one. So when you share, you just click on whiteboard there. You can write, draw, spotlight or highlight. You can erase, you can undo, redo, and save. You can also take screenshots on your whiteboard to share with your class after the lesson, as long as it doesn't have student names or other sensitive or copyright protected content on it. I'll have a look at the chat. So you access the chat box by clicking on chat, and the chat box opens on the right-hand side of your screen. You can view and you can respond to the chat there. You can also choose whether you want to send messages to all of your students or just one or two. You can also use the chat box to share clickable links and documents. So to share a link to a web page, for example, you just copy the URL and you paste it into the chat box. Sharing a document's even easier, so you just go to your computer where you have the file, click on it, and drag it into the area where you type in the chat. You release it, and then it will be sent to all of your students. So in settings, you should probably turn off direct chat between students to ensure that all interaction in your classroom is visible by you, the teacher. Especially if you have children or people under 18, you need to really see what's happening, how those students are communicating between each other on the platform. So I'd strongly advise you to turn off direct chat or private chat. So we looked earlier at breakout rooms. In Zoom, there's a maximum of 50 rooms. That's quite a lot of rooms, but some of you have large classes. And you can choose the groupings or let Zoom assign the students randomly. And it's very easy to move between the rooms to monitor as well. You just click on them. Some of you mentioned that you couldn't see breakout rooms in Zoom. That's probably because you need to turn them on. So when you open a Zoom account, it doesn't necessarily always have the breakout rooms turned on. So if you can't see them in your meeting, go out of the meeting, go to the settings, and then you can enable them just by toggling the button there. Okay, so let's move on now and have a look at a platform that's maybe a little bit more easy to use or simple to use.
And that platform is Google Hangouts, which is Google's free video conferencing tool. Up to 10 participants can join a Google Hangout at a time, or more if you have G Suite or G Suite for Education. Google Hangouts works with other Google apps, such as Drive and Docs, which means that other apps are already on hand and available for use. To access Google Hangouts, you need to have a Google account, and you can find the app on your Google account homepage. One of the best things about Google Hangouts is that it's incredibly easy to use. From the main screen, there are just 3 buttons: video call, phone call, and message. Video is the usual way of communicating in lessons in Google Hangouts, but if connectivity is a problem, everyone can disable the cameras and just use audio instead. Select video call or audio call, and you'll be asked to invite students to your lesson. Now, there are 2 ways to do this. Your first option is to type in your students' email addresses and click invite. Your students will then receive an invitation to connect with you. Your second option is to click copy link and share that link with your students. When they receive the link, they can click on it and they'll be connected to your lesson. G Suite for Education would be more appropriate if you're teaching children. To open the chat box, message, simply click the message button from the main screen. You can use message to communicate with text. From here, you can also share links and documents by pasting them into the chat box, as we mentioned before. You'll find other controls in the top right-hand corner of the screen, including share. Again, here you can share screen. There isn't an integrated whiteboard, but you could use an online whiteboard or a Google Doc and share that on your screen with your students instead. So at the other end then, let's move on and look at an example of a platform with a few more features now.
Yeah, we're going to have a look at Microsoft Teams. So, and I noticed a couple of people mentioning other online platforms. So we obviously haven't got time to look at every platform in detail. So we're showing you 3 platforms which have different, they're slightly different because they're either a little bit more simple or they have all the features or they have extra features. But there are lots of different platforms that you can teach from. These aren't the only ones, okay? So Microsoft Teams is a video conferencing tool that links up to Microsoft Office 365. It comes with an Office 365 account with the appropriate license plan. Office 365 Education is currently available for free, and your school can sign up and create an account. And to use this, teachers and students need to be added in the school account. It's really easy to download Microsoft Teams. You just go to the website and follow the directions there, either on your laptop, your desktop, or your mobile device, and then you can sign in from there. So if your school hasn't already set up your class, you'll need to create one. And in Teams, in Microsoft Teams, this is called a team. So you can create a class or a team by clicking on the Join or Create Team button in the top right of the application. And from now on, you'll be able to access your team by clicking on the Teams button in the left-hand toolbar. To schedule a meeting with your class, you click on the Calendar button on the left-hand toolbar. And from here, you can add a new meeting. Alternately, at the bottom of the channel conversation, that's like the chat, you click on the video icon to open a meeting and then click on Schedule Meeting. Once you've scheduled your class, your students will be able to see and to access it in their calendars. And when you open a meeting in Microsoft Teams, you'll see lots of different things there. You'll have various options on the toolbar in the center of the screen. You've got the camera, mute, share, more actions, and that includes things like maybe blurring your background and transcription of the audio, which is interesting. Not always, it doesn't always keep up with your students and what they're actually trying to say, but it's interesting sometimes for your students to turn it on to hear what you're saying or to see what you're saying. It's got conversation, participants, and hang up. The conversation, the chat is there, and that's the same as other tools. It's got a nice chat feature. So if you're in a video call, it looks like this, and you can click on share and then select a screen to share content with your students. So you can see here, there's all the different windows displayed on my computer. So I just click on the one that I want to share. And importantly, there's that button again, that tiny button, which says include system audio. So you can share your audio or the audio from your video from this menu. And when you're sharing, you'll see a smaller box. I think it's hidden by Ollie's camera there. There's a little box where you can stop sharing your screen. Thanks, Ollie.
No problem.
Stop sharing your screen, and you can turn the camera and the audio on and off if you want from there as well. And you can share the whiteboard. So this might be, in Teams, the whiteboard might be useful for things like drawing pictures, but I think you'll get more functionality in a shared document like the class notebook, or you could share a third-party whiteboard as well. But there's extra features in Teams which are interesting and useful. So here you can see the class notebook. And the class notebook you can open from the tab at the top of the window where those two arrows are on the screen there. If you have a look, it says class notebook. And this lets you create and use pages which you can share with the whole class or with individual students. And it also includes a personal workspace for each student, a content library where you can put resources, and a collaboration space. So you can share documents really easily in Teams. You can pop them into the general channel conversation. So this is like what we said before. This is the chat, and then you can just drag and drop a file into the text box. If you do this, students open that file, they'll work on it together. But if you want them to work separately on a document, you need to make sure they download a copy first, yeah? Otherwise they'll be working on the same document. So this general channel or chat here works as your chat function. And it's also visible whether you're in a meeting or not. So this is unlike the other two that we looked at before. So this is a permanent record of the class conversation. And you can see here, a little bit above, there's 2 assignments, in fact, have been added to this conversation. So this is another feature that you have in Teams. So you can create assignments, again, by clicking on the tab at the top of the window between those 2 arrows there. And after you've created and assigned the work, you can also use this tab to manage timelines or give additional instructions and add other resources for your students to access. Here's an example of an assignment. You can add a title, your instructions, links, documents. You can also add points, rubrics, and submission dates, which is handy. And you can also use the grades tab at the top there to view and grade assignments and track how students are progressing. So there's a few more features in Microsoft Teams which might be useful to you. So here you can see channels. So Microsoft Teams, the breakout rooms doesn't work in quite the same way, but you can create additional channels in your team or class, and you could assign groupings in the conversation in the chat and ask students to go to separate channels for pair or group work. Might be a bit different in Teams for Education. Okay, so let's wrap up there, Ollie.
So we've shown you 3 platforms, which are all a bit different. Of these 3, Zoom has all the features we've been talking about. Google Hangouts is really simple and easy to use, and Microsoft Teams has a much wider offer. There are other platforms too. Skype and Google Hangouts are similar. You might prefer Google Classroom to the Microsoft offer. And there are other tools like Blackboard and Whereby. So would you use one of these platforms? We'd love to know which one looks best for your teaching context. Please tell us in the poll, which tool would you use? Zoom, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, or a different tool? I'll repeat that. Please tell us in the poll, which tool would you use? Zoom, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, or a different tool? If you'd use a different tool, let us know in the chat.
Oh, wow. I'm just looking at the poll here, Ollie.
Yeah, I'm with
We've
you.
got about 65% of you saying that you'd use Zoom. So it really does depend on your context. Like we said earlier, maybe if you're teaching older learners, then Zoom's more appropriate. If you are working in a school, your school might choose the platform for you, in which case, you wouldn't have as much choice there. Google Hangouts is good for, using with smaller groups, perhaps. But they're all very good tools. And as we said, there are different tools out there as well.
Yeah,
I'm just looking in the chat now to see if there's any other tools there that people are talking about.
There's still a lot of Zoom in the chat as well.
Some of you are using Teams, Skype.
And WhatsApp as well.
Yeah.
I've never used WhatsApp to teach a whole class, to arrange them and set homework, yes, but never to teach entirely from that.
Some of you talking about certain platforms being blocked in your country. So again, that's a really important point. You have to choose something which is available and reliable for you to use, and something that suits you and suits your learners. And when we come to safety in a minute, yeah, it's important to choose something which is appropriate for your context.
All right, well, we hope you found it useful to look at these platforms in more detail. We'd like to finish now, though, with some advice, tips and tricks. Helen.
Yeah. Okay, safety. Safety first. It's my motto. So you must check that the platform that you use and the way that you use it is safe. And if you're working with a school, it must conform with privacy, safety, and use of data policies. I've just noticed someone saying they're not allowed to use Zoom. You need to ask yourself these questions. Who can access your student data and your data as well, of course? Either use a tool that your school has authorized, or make sure you read the platform terms and conditions and privacy statements very carefully to understand how data is captured, stored, and shared. And if you're unsure, there's lots of forums online where you can get more information as well, or you can talk to the platform provider if you need to. Make sure you choose a tool that you're satisfied meets your requirements in that way. Think about who can get into the class. So this is probably responding to some of those Zoom stories online at the moment, okay? Keep the link to your lessons private. Share lesson information and links through your school system or email, or use a platform that requires students to log in with a password. On Zoom, you can set it so that they have to have a password to get into the classroom, okay? Who can see and share video? Unless you have permission, don't record your lessons or allow them to be recorded. And if you do record, ensure that video files are stored and made available securely. And finally, can you monitor all conversations on the platform? So we talked about this before. You should change the settings so that students can't have private chat on the platform in your lessons. So over to Ollie with some tips and tricks.
All right then. My first tip would be watch video tutorials to help you use your platform. You can find lots of tutorials online in different languages. And why not send all your students to a link of a video tutorial too? It can be in their first language. There's no need to make it more difficult. And then you can spend the first 10 minutes of your first lesson playing games to allow everyone to get used to the different features. The next one, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, or right at the beginning even, it's a really good idea to rehearse a lesson, preferably with a few other teachers. This way you can take turns hosting, and this means you experience the platform as both a teacher and a student, because there are some things that are a little different. Remember, we've shown lots of features here, but you do not have to use all the features in your first lesson, just the ones that are going to improve the experience for everybody. Next, if you can, keep lessons short. Assign independent study time. For example, listening to an audio, video, reading and written practice, and then use shorter online classes for things like sharing, comparing, discussing, giving advice and reassurance, nurturing a learning atmosphere and community, praising, and of course, having fun. Also, if you're going to use breakout rooms, try to plan the groupings in advance. It'll make things much easier in the lesson. On a similar note, have any links ready to go on a Word document so you can quickly copy and paste them into the chat. You should also check your internet speed before every lesson. You can easily do this on most devices. Just search for the term internet speed check. If it's slow, then keep your camera off. Finally, make sure you sit in a well-lit and quiet place for your lessons. Be mindful of what's going on behind you and try to have a solid wall behind you like I have now.
Yeah, and I'd say try and recommend that your students do that too.
Good tip.
Sorry, Ollie, I interrupted you.
No, good tip. I should add that one. So that was also well timed, because that really concludes our webinar today. We've looked at different features, how they can be used together in an English lesson, and a few platforms to give you an idea of what you want from a platform, and so help you to choose one that'll work for you in your context. Now, there's still time for a short question and answer session, so please write in with your questions now. You can ask about what we've looked at today, or perhaps you'd like to ask a more general question about teaching online. We'll answer as many as we can in the time we have left. So I'll say that again, write in now with your questions about teaching online.
Yeah, I've just spotted two while I've been listening there, Ollie. One is about monitoring conversations. So I think the thing about making conversation visible to the teacher is not that the teacher necessarily has to read all of that conversation. It's the fact that that conversation is visible publicly and it doesn't occur in a private space. So especially if you have children in your classrooms, you want to ensure that all of your students have a common understanding of the rules of behavior in those conversations. And making it public means that everybody can monitor that conversation and raise any concerns if some of the conversation is inappropriate for your learners, or if there's any kind of bullying or anything that kind of thing happening in those private chats. It's much better to make that conversation visible so that you can understand what's happening, and so that everybody can monitor and support a positive learning environment.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a few people asking about third-party whiteboards. There are lots and lots of them available. There's one called Whiteboard Fox, which is quite good. Real-Time Board is another one. But the bottom line is search, find one that you think is easy to use, and then a couple of things to look out for. One, make sure that you can share it in real time with your students. And two, it's very useful if the board can be collaborated on by everybody. So it's not just you using the board, but you could also invite the students to use it as well.
I've got one here, Ollie. Should we give instructions orally or write them, or both? That's from Ludmila.
I guess it depends on how complicated the instructions are. If it's something nice and easy, I would do it orally, as I would face-to-face. If it's something a bit more complicated, perhaps you're setting up a role play for people to do in a breakout room, I think then it's a good idea to have instructions written down, maybe in bullet point form, so the students can refer back to them afterwards.
Yeah, and you can share instructions in different ways, can't you? So if you have like a handout, you can have all your instructions there anyway, so it's there for people to refer back to. I mean, that's nice as well. If students have different needs, so maybe they need larger text or they need text on a coloured background and things like that as well, or maybe they've got hearing difficulties, then, you know, sort of providing instructions in different ways can only enhance how your students interact with the content in your classroom.
I'm seeing lots of requests for people asking for tips and tricks for primary.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's not my forte, but I would say try and keep as much of the fun as you can in your online lesson. Continue to use things like puppets and Realia. My other tip there would be you don't just have to sit as we are now with your head in a box. Position the laptop a little further away from you, stand up, move around, encourage the students to do the same. Anything else, Helen?
I'd say, yeah, for primary learners, yeah, definitely get them up and moving. Maybe set activities where they're not actually with you online. So set independent study tasks as well that they can do in other ways. So it's not all screen time, because I think that's very important with that younger audience. So you might set a little video to watch and some kind of activity to follow up on that, maybe a drawing activity, maybe a writing activity, maybe a preparation for something that you're going to do in class. And then after they've done that, then you have a shorter lesson where you can share what they've produced. You know, you can talk about what they've done. It's really fun and interesting because they're looking at the stuff that they've produced and what the other kids did instead. That kind of stuff is really nice, where you can use the online classroom for interaction and sharing and speaking. But maybe some of those other activities take place elsewhere. But like you said, Ollie, like puppets, fantastic online. It's like live TV. It's great. Well, even like, so like, Ollie, where's your puppet? Do you know what I mean? You can have different people doing different things at the same time. They can talk to each other. You could draw on your hand. You know, you could have different personalities. You could have stick puppets, little paper plates or anything like that. So you can do lots of really creative stuff with children. It's just a case of thinking about what would you do normally and how would that work in an online environment. Maybe there's things that you might need to share with your learners in advance, or tasks that they need to do in advance to make the most of your online time. And the whiteboard's great. You can draw on the whiteboard. They can all draw on the whiteboard at the same time. It's kind of chaotic, but once you've got past that, you know, initial bit where it's a bit crazy, then actually you can have some really nice creative work there, or shared collaborative work on a whiteboard like that. I'm just scrolling through to see if there's some other questions there, Ollie.
Yeah, assessment is coming up again. Yeah, it's true. Assessment is more difficult online. I know a lot of teachers will be worrying about cheating. That's normal, normal to worry about it, that is. And the truth is there's not so much you can do, really. What I tend to do is assess people with spoken, so an oral assessment in a breakout room, maybe a written task, and then maybe a test on something like Google Forms. Using all three together gives you a pretty good idea to evaluate your students.
Yeah, and there's lots of room as well for, if you're thinking about formative or ongoing assessments, there's lots of room for thinking about how the students can help you and help each other in that area too. So things like, maybe if you set a speaking task, maybe use an online notice board for them to upload their audio response, their spoken response to the task. And then peers can give feedback. So you maybe share the criteria with them and they can give feedback on those audios. People can then re-record based on the feedback that they got. And then by the time you get it, it's a lot easier for you to go through them because they're better quality. You don't have to give all that basic feedback because that will already have been done. And you can think of different ways of managing that scenario. So trying to reduce the workload as well, because this is another issue really with teaching online. A lot of people are concerned, or they're finding that they're spending a lot of time preparing and then doing all the lessons and then kind of dealing with, sort of giving feedback and grades as well. And I guess it's like one of those things that when you start, it takes a little bit longer. So look for ways that you can manage it. You don't have to provide feedback to everybody all the time. The doing of the work is the achievement, isn't it? The doing of the work that the learners do is what you're trying to get them to do. They don't need a grade on every single piece of work. So, just think carefully about what you can achieve and be kind to yourself. And good enough is good enough. I mean, that's a really good phrase. That's from an online course that we're running. But good enough is good enough. And while you're learning and while you're getting used to this different environment, you need to be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think we're going to bring things to a close now. We've just got a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to show you a couple of things that you might be interested for next steps. So if you'd like to help us to help you, we are running a survey at the moment about your experiences teaching English online. And the idea there is that we can collect and understand a little bit more about your context, and that will help us to deliver information and training like this, which is useful to you. So please do fill in that survey if that is something that you'd be interested in. We also tomorrow, on Thursday, the 9th of April at 4:30, that's UK time, we have a Facebook Live called Ask Me Anything, which might be terrifying, but that sounds to be a really exciting session. So that's on the Cambridge University Press ELT Facebook page, and you can get these slides afterwards if you want that link. Other things that we have available for you next, we have an initiative called Supporting Every Teacher. And here you can find out all kinds of information. We've got blog posts, we've got online courses, we've got exam prep materials, lots and lots of different things to help you adapt to teaching online. And the online course I just spoke about. So we're running, this is the second run, in fact, of an award-winning course about teaching online, and it's specifically to help you teach English online. So it covers the different skills, reading, writing, speaking, listening, grammar and vocabulary, how to set up, how to get started, all that kind of thing. And like today, it's about how you can adapt your existing practice, what you usually do, to this online environment. So that's a 4-week course. And Ollie, is it 4 hours a week?
Yeah, more or less. But of course, you can spend more or less as you want.
Yeah, and it's lovely because it's our lead educators are in there, so obviously you're talking to experts, but there's a lovely community there as well. So you learn from the other people's experiences of teaching English online, and you pick up tips from people in the same context as you as well. We also have available a support pack for teachers, which gives you some information about all kinds of digital resources, games, all that kind of stuff, ideas and tools that you can use in your online classrooms, or any classroom, in fact. And talking about exam preparation, we have some lesson plans available for you. If you're teaching young learners, you might be interested in the World of Fun resources. And we also have exam boosters, which have been made available for you to help you with the exams here for A2 Key, B1 Preliminary, B2 First, and C1 Advanced. Okie dokie. So I hope that today's webinar has been useful for you. And I'd like to thank everybody for your contribution. Thank you very much. It's really, really important to ask the questions you have and to share your ideas at this very difficult time, so that we can approach the challenge in front of us with more confidence and to try and support our students too in their learning. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure, and goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.